Before we start, you should check out my previous video. It's nearly 2 hours of scary stories, but I narrate them literally in the woods. So if you like to sleep while listening to stories or you enjoy nature sounds and ASMR, I highly recommend you check out that episode and let me know if you want to see more like it. As for now, I've got some of your favorite stories, allegedly true and terrifying camping stories. So, stoke your campfire and keep the predators at bay. It's time for a night full of the best kinds of nightmares. If you like what I do, like this video, and be sure to leave a comment below telling me what your greatest fear is and why you think that is. And don't forget to send me your scary stories at darkstories.org. I'm still on the lookout for scary stories from truckers. Now, let's begin. The Uninvited Camper from D3MOV. It was back in summer holidays of 2018. My friend and I went to a scout camp. We were scouts back then. As with most every scout camp, this one was set deep in the forest near a lake. Said lake was in Poland. It's called Saino, and the nearest city is Augusto. Scouting was really fun when we were younger. We were taught basic survival tips and discipline. Apart from that, we met a lot of nice people in the community of scouts. As we got older, it became less and less fascinating, eventually leading us to leave. The truth, though, is that if we didn't experience this strange event, we probably would have left a bit later. So the camp itself seemed to be normal as usual. There were a lot of activities throughout the day, so normally we would fall asleep quite fast after being exhausted from a long day. The only time that people could admire the silent and pitch-black nights in the middle of the woods was the night guard. Every night had a different pair of 2 scouts chosen to do the shift, which lasted until 6 a.m. The tasks on the guard included checking the campsite now and then. After some time, though, people which have had their night shifts done started to tell us about weird sounds of sticks cracking on the forest floor all around the camp itself. A lot of these complaints would be ignored, as the scoutmaster would say it was just the sound of the woods, vegetation, small animals, and such. Of course, back then we believed him, until it was my turn on the night guard. The aforementioned friend and I were the ones to take the night shift that day. We went to sleep early and prepared warm clothes and a flashlight. It started at 12 p.m., and everything seemed to be going normal, until the strange cracking noise that others told us came about. It must have been 1:30 a.m. It was pitch black, so we turned on the flashlight and pointed it in the direction the sound was coming from. But there was nothing there. No animals, no people. We brushed it off and reminded ourselves of the words of our scoutmaster. Yeah, it probably was just the sound of the woods, I reminded us. It went quiet for a while, but the sound came again sometime later. We tried to remain calm, and so we did until the crackling noises got closer and closer. My friend, who I'll refer to as Kate, froze and looked like she was trying to hear something. I asked her, "What do you hear?" What she replied sent shivers running down my spine. "I hear whispers." Who or what would be whispering in the middle of the night, middle of the forest, when everyone was supposed to be sleeping? Then I thought that maybe Kate was just pranking me, so I tried to remain calm. We continued our shift looking around and doing our night guard duties. We were talking about which school we'd choose, as the holidays were nearing their end. The chat continued until we noticed that behind one of the tents, the branches had moved. Kate and I looked at one another, creeped out, and decided to investigate. We went there from 2 sides of the tent, me on the left and Kate on the right. I began scanning the surroundings for anything when I heard Kate gasp I quickly went over to her and asked what was wrong. She replied, "I think I see a man standing over there." I immediately began thinking that it could be just some intruder, a homeless man, or just some lost guy wandering around the forest. I asked, "Where?" She pointed in the direction she had seen him, but I didn't see anyone. We got back to the log where we were previously sitting, but on the way I felt the need to use the bathroom. So I headed in the other direction, letting her know we'd meet up at the log. I went a bit deep into the trees to have some privacy away from the camp. When I got back, Kate was gone. I called out in a whisper, "Kate! Kate! Where are you?" But there was no response. Then I heard footsteps and thought it was her. When I turned around with the flashlight in hand, I saw a man. He was pale, with soulless eyes, all wet. He whispered, "Help me. Help me." I quickly ran away, my heart pounding, when I stumbled into Kate, who said that she had gone to her tent for a moment. She asked me, "What's wrong with you?" She must have seen how panicked I was. I answered, stuttering a bit, I think I saw the man you told me about." She looked behind me and froze. He was still standing there, still all wet, looking at me with those lifeless eyes. She screamed, waking up the whole campsite. The scoutmaster got to us, shouting, "What's going on?" And we began to explain everything. Of course, he didn't believe us, and we even got punished for waking up everyone. But other scouts, the ones who were on the night guard before us, seemed to believe us. After getting back home, I got a message from Kate, which said, "Oh my God, you need to see this." Then she sent me a link to an article from 2012. It was about two brothers that drowned in the very same lake, near the very same shore that the camp sat. The police report said that the older of the two, a 36-year-old man, most probably wanted to rescue his brother, who was drowning. He jumped in, clothes and all, in a hurry, leading to the death of both of them. I was in shock. Could this man be one of the brothers? Could it be his ghost? Or was it just some random creep? I don't really know, but that event made me quit scouting earlier than I thought I would. Don't go to Elk Island National Park. From Drift. I live around the Edmonton, Canada area. This took place 2 years ago. I was 17 years old at the time, and I had become curious about alleged skinwalkers in the Elk Island National Park area. Knowing the people in my school who talked about it, I knew this could probably just be a rumor from some drunk teenagers thinking a deer was a skinwalker at night. Either way, me and my friends wanted to see if the legends were true. To this day, I don't know why I let myself get peer pressured into this after my friends called me a chicken. Keep in mind, I was 17 at the time, and somehow being called a chicken got me to go on the most regretful trip of my life. So we decided before class started that me, and for this story we'll call him Tom, would sneak through a hole in the gate. I walked past this area. While the hole was very small, it was big enough to get in. We were going to sneak in our friends who were 19 and had their permits to camp at the local Canadian national parks. They agreed to help us get in. Now, at this camping trip, my two friends that were going to help us get in already found a good area where they wanted to set up camp for the night. It was about 2.5 miles into dense woods. This was followed by a nearly invisible path that curved to the right. Believe it or not, it was even more dense than the main road that could barely fit an average car. The only thing telling us it was an actual road was a sign that said, "Deer ahead." The whole idea sounded sketchy to me. At the rate we were going, we would get to our spot in less than half an hour. They were speeding through the woods in one of the most bumpy roads I've ever been on. Unsurprisingly, the car soon broke down, right as we got to the side path. This meant we had to walk the rest of the way. One of the friends tried to pull up his GPS on his phone, so we would know where we were going. But his phone didn't turn on. I asked, "Do you know where we're going?" And he seemed not to hear me, or he ignored me, because he whispered to himself, "I swear I charged my phone before I left." We all stopped to look around us. We could feel we were being watched. Then suddenly, we heard footsteps around us. The sound of dry sticks being cracked in the silent forest made me afraid for my life. We also couldn't see the thing that was doing this. But then it all stopped. It seemed like we all thought the same thing, because at the same time we all ran back to the car. As we were running, I could hear the sound of something running behind us. Then I heard Tom's voice. "Help!" Soon I heard the voice again in the far distance. "Stop!" It faded really fast and was coming from deeper into the woods. A sudden surge of courage came over me. I turned around to where I heard the voice of my friend. While running, I heard nothing for a while. Then I took a break on a log. But then I heard Tom's voice calling for help again, and it wasn't far from me now. I ran over to the voice. I was soon greeted by a large clearing which was illuminated by moonlight. I heard Tom again saying stop, but this time it sounded gurgly. But it also sounded distorted. I looked all around me, but I still didn't see anything. I knew at this point whatever was trying to get my attention probably wasn't actually Tom. Then right behind me I heard, "Do you know where we're going?" It sounded more like me this time. Then it said again, "Do you know where we're going?" This time it was more deep and distorted. Somehow I managed to get the courage to turn around, and I saw the most horrific thing I've ever seen. There was a creature there on all fours that had a normal right arm but slightly bent, but the left arm was completely bent the opposite direction that an arm is meant to. Its left leg was missing a foot, but the right leg had a stump with a weird wolf-looking paw. Its glowing yellow eyes looked into mine, then it stood up. I'm 6'1", and this thing was overlapping me by about 2 feet. That's when I saw the dark red substance dripping from its jaw. While we stared at each other, it opened its mouth and said, "Help!" Its mouth moved like a puppet, unnaturally. Its voice was much too deep to be Tom's. I was frozen, but it said one more thing that gives me goosebumps even still. "Leave now." I swear it carried the sound of the W and now for an entire minute. I said nothing, then ran off back towards the direction of the road. When I found the road, I saw that the car was gone. They must have gotten in it without me, gotten it working somehow. This left me having to walk the most horrific walk in my life, but by then all the sounds came back, the crickets, frogs, all making their usual sounds. This gave me comfort. What I saw in that forest, I cannot explain, and the terror I felt cannot be described. After that day, I would love to say that I moved on, but the memory of that thing will never leave me. Just remember, if you're going to camp or visit Elk Island National Park, you've already made a big mistake. Possible alien encounter from Mr. Anonymous. I don't know what happened, and I don't want to assume anything. But here we go. A couple of weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were camping in our backyard, like we've done numerous times before. We were drinking some wine by the campfire and making s'mores. We decided to retire into the tent around 2 a.m. I had managed to set up a TV and PS4 so that we could entertain ourselves before going to sleep. We cuddled, and she fell asleep around 2:30 a.m., and I fell asleep shortly after. I woke up around 4:30. I needed to use the bathroom pretty bad. I didn't want to wake my girlfriend up though, as the zipper to the tent was kind of loud. So I used a bottle to the right of me. I turned to go back to sleep when I noticed that my girlfriend was gone. I'm startled and immediately worried. I call out her name, but I don't get a response. I threw on my shoes and grabbed the flashlight fast as I could, then ran out of the tent looking for her. She has walked in her sleep before in the past, though not since we've been together, which has been 2.5 years, so this was odd and sudden. I couldn't find her in the pitch blackness of the yard, so I ran to the downstairs sliding glass door and began to yell her name. Finally, I hear her voice from upstairs. She's yelling for me, asking if everything is okay, as my voice sounded really shaky. I asked her why she just up and left me in the tent like that, but she said, I didn't. I have no idea how the heck I got inside, let alone on the futon upstairs. I called bullcrap, because if you sleepwalk, you don't close the tent zipper back up and close all the doors behind you. We went to go look for her phone because she had no recollection of even going inside the tent, even though she had only had a half bottle of wine. We aren't lightweights in the least. It usually takes a bottle and a half each for us to get drunk. I searched around. We managed to find her shoes, phone, and glasses inside the tent. I don't know what happened, but I know that's not sleepwalking. I've seen people do that before, and she's done it in the past. It's nothing like she's been through before. I also want to point out that I'm a very light sleeper. I would wake up to the slightest noise. Quite annoying, actually. So I would have heard her get out of the tent, especially the rustling of the sleeping bags. Yet her side was made perfectly. Like instead of getting out of the sleeping bag, she had simply vanished into thin air and reappeared in the house. Also, one last thing. My girlfriend reminded me about that night. That it was the only night we had slept without our dog or cat in the tent with us. So if something had wanted to take her out of the tent, perhaps it was feeling a bit more brave. But who knows? Thanks for listening, and I'd like to hear what you think may have happened. Goatman in Jamaica. From my Instagram is Jose_fa. I was 14 years old. It was Saturday, and we were going camping in one of the more rural parts of Jamaica. I won't name the place for privacy reasons. Now, I'm 5'3" and have a medium frame build, and we were going from where we lived to about an hour and a half worth of driving away. I'll read the rest of this in present tense at the request of the author. When we get there, we get our stuff from the truck and begin hiking to find a good spot. We come across a nice, calm, crisp-looking stream, so we decide to get some dinner right away. About 2 hours later, we pack up and start moving again. By now, it's about 4:30 p.m., and we find a good enough spot to set up camp. All of a sudden, though, we pick up this awful, pungent smell. It honestly smelled like expired sour cream and rotten eggs mixed in a toilet that hadn't been cleaned for years, then left in the sun. And it was close. I feel chills go down my spine and a wave of dread rush over me. when I hear the shrillest, most ear-piercing screech I'd ever heard in my life. I grab the sawed-off double-barrel shotgun and run inside the tent, but I manage to fall asleep soon, despite it only being 6 p.m. At about 2 a.m., I awake to the sound of a branch snapping, and to make matters worse, I had to use the bathroom. Now, I'm a horror movie enthusiast. I knew all too well what not to do in situations like this. So I lie still with the double barrel still in my hand, ready to fire if I have to. Fast forward about 10 minutes later, when I hear my uncle scream. I quickly wake my dad, who is sleeping next to me, and slowly walk out, thinking he's just playing a trick on us. Or hoping, I guess. But nothing could ever prepare me for what I see. This thing was at least 8 feet tall, and it exuded the same smell I described earlier. It has 2 horns sticking out of its head, and it stands on 2 awfully man-like legs. I was assuming I was in heck, looking at the devil himself. Within no more than 2 awfully long seconds, I fire at the thing's leg. It jolts back in a way that is human-like, a little too human. Then it happens. This creature turns around and acknowledges us, almost as if it wants to speak. And by God, I swear it does. I don't exactly remember what it said, but it speaks in a deep, raspy, manly voice. I remember it having hellish red gleaming eyes that stared through my soul. I fire again, this time into its back, which seemed to be covered with white, dirty, disgusting-looking fur. After 5 seconds or so, the creature runs off into the woods, leaving a trail of what appeared to be blood. I look over at my uncle. He's almost in tears. As for my dad, he's just frozen. I don't know how I'm not as well. We all stay in one tent, packing things up, planning to book it back to the truck as soon as the sun comes up. After about 7 hours, the sun finally comes up, and we all do as planned. When we get to the truck, we start it and drive out of there like a bat out of heck. On the ride home, we don't say a word, not until we get home. You'd think the story ends there, right? Well, not all fairy tales have happy endings, I'll tell you that. About 2 weeks later, we go down to the countryside to look for my aunt, uncle, and cousins. The drive was about 3 hours away from where we lived, so we go to spend the night with them. When we get there, we see them all standing on the front patio, waiting for us, with a look of joy on their faces. Now, this place was about 5 acres of empty woodland area, but it had great lighting around the house from the LED solar-powered lights. Anyway, after about 10 minutes of talking and catching up, we all go inside and make our way to the bathrooms to freshen up. When I'm finished, I get out and make my way to the room I'm staying in. When it's about 10 p.m., I decide I'm going to bed. I say my goodnights and go up to the room. It's dark, and I don't bother to turn on the light. I just go straight over to the bed and tuck myself in. I hear the door open at one point, but brush it off as my cousin's coming in. About 2 hours later, Mario comes in, turns on the light, and screams. I'll never forget the look on his face when I ask, "What's wrong?" He looks as if he had just killed someone, accidentally. He's in total awe, because the thing that had been in the room with me was not my cousin. It was the thing we'd seen before, and we both are now watching it walk to the open window, descend, and walk away into the woods as if nothing happened. It moved so human-like, so disgusting, so purposefully. Everyone runs upstairs and asks what happened. We finish telling them the story, and Brian simply says, "Goatman." Fortunately, this was the last time I personally had an experience with this creature, and I hope it remains to be the last time. But sometimes I wonder, What would have happened if I had turned on the light? Or if Mario didn't come in when he did? Or if he had laid down next to this thing without bothering to turn on the light himself? I'm glad I don't know. It screamed from the Nightrunner. I live in Minnesota, but I went to Wisconsin for a Boy Scout camping trip. We were going to Tomahawk, which is what the Boy Scout troop camp is called. I thought it'd be fun, but that feeling was about to change when on the third day I was going to the store just for a souvenir. I bought a hatchet. As I was on my way back, I looked for my friend Thomas, but he wasn't around. After giving up on looking, I went to head back to camp. Mind you, by then it was dark out, and I had no source of light, just some people in the distance. I cursed in my head about my friend just leaving me there, wondering why he did. After about 5 minutes of walking, I hear this faint scream. It was distant, but it was just eerie enough that I wanted to start running. But then the scream got louder, closer. Even though I thought I would be at camp by now, it scared me out of my skin. Then came a growl right behind me. Without thinking, I looked behind me. I saw something. It was paler than gray, kind of a whitish tint. Its face still gives me night terrors just thinking about it. I heard it crashing through the forest. Eventually, and thank God, I made it back to camp after running away from it. In my panic, though, I did end up tripping over a root. I fell, causing myself to bleed. My scoutmaster came and helped me up, and my friend ended up getting in trouble for leaving me. But, end of story, I still don't know what the thing was, and I still have no idea how it was capable of traveling a few hundred yards in a few seconds, because I know the scream wasn't that close, and then suddenly, it was growling next to me. If you have any clue, let me know. Skinwalker in Shreve, Ohio. From Pat. It was 2009. Me and my best friend B were camping in the backyard in rural Shreve, Ohio. I grew up on a couple of acres of land surrounded by roughly 1,500 acres of farmland. As we were camping and YouTubing skateboard videos, we began to hear coyotes off in the woods to our left. This is really common where I'm from, and generally they don't bother us. The coyotes were yelling and being loud, but then they just stopped making any noise at all. This was the first thing that really had us on edge. Then, out of nowhere, we hear a different noise, the sound of a large dog sniffing right outside our tent. We were pretty freaked out, as this was the closest a coyote had ever been to us. But then, a large human-like hand lays itself on the tent door where we could see it. We were just silent, too afraid to do anything. We sit there, wondering what on earth we could do. Out of nowhere, something huge begins to crawl underneath the tent. I'm not sure why it was so desperate to get under it. The whole time it was growling viciously too. My friend grabbed the hammer we used for the tent stakes, and all at once, he starts to hit the thing where he felt the head was. Instead of a yelp, like any dog would, this creature growled even worse. It sounded demonic. After hitting it a few more times, we ran as fast as we could through the tent door and across an acre yard through the door to my garage. Every time I glanced behind us, I saw this massive shadow following close behind. Maybe I didn't look long enough at it when I glanced, as I didn't make anything out more than a black silhouette. Then again, it was dark and in the middle of nowhere. We get inside, and that's really where the tale ends. I remember being terribly scared for the whole night, and I never trusted those woods again. Sure, I'm not entirely certain it was a skinwalker, but that's what comes to mind. as it sounded like and behaved like a large dog, but its hand was definitely shaped like a person's. But I know it wasn't human. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way soon. So let me know in the comments what you want to hear, and be sure to send me your scary stories at darkstories.org. I would love to hear experiences from truckers. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate or have donated in the past. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.